I'm Jane Applegath. This is the Epic Vision Zone. Are you looking to become a writer? Have you been longing to finally become a published author but aren't? Do you need accountability and crave results? Henry David Thoreau wrote, "If one advances confidently in the direction of their dreams and endeavors to live the life which they imagined, that person will meet a successful, unexpected common life." Tamika Murray, owner of Mystical Fire Ascension Life Coaching and award-winning author, freelance writer, is here to awaken the brilliant spirit and writer within you. Tamika has penned and edited 11 books. Her spiritual gifts, energetic coaching, and creative guidance will fuel your path to becoming a best-selling author. Welcome, Tamika. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we're so excited to get started because I know so many individuals who are longing to write a book, but we keep putting it off, stalling, saying it's too much work. So I can't wait to delve into this topic. So tell us a little bit of what inspired you, Tamika, to become a spiritual writing coach.
Oh my goodness. I think it was just something that I kind of fell into. I feel like I was doing it unofficially for many, many years because whatever profession I've done throughout the years, I've always done it from a place of service. I just like helping people naturally. Because, like when you're in school and they always ask you, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? Um, I always had like so many different ideas going around, and there's a lot of things that I wanted to do, and there's still some things on my list that I might accomplish one day. You never know, because I tend to get bored easily. But specifically to become a spiritual life coach and writing coach, it was something that came about through both my life experiences. I had a mother who she battled breast cancer off and on 3 different times before she passed away, and she was only 56 years old when she passed away. And it was quite suddenly, actually. She did not pass away because of the cancer. It could have just been like years of deterioration and everything that her body endured from all the chemo and radiation. But she ultimately passed away from a ruptured blood clot. It was undetected. Yeah, and she passed away Thanksgiving weekend of
Oh, no.
2016. So up until that point, I had been a social worker. I had been, that was just my thing, like always helping people when they were in a season of chaos, basically. And it was my job to be the quiet eye in that storm and help navigate them as best I could. And so, when she passed away, I went through this, time of grieving, and I was in a relationship, but I wasn't very happy or fulfilled in it. And when that ended, a lot of things started changing and happening for me. And so I was being guided by spirit to become a life coach. It was something that I had thought about years prior, even back when my mother was still alive. And it was something that I wanted to do, but at the time I really didn't have the time in my schedule being a social worker. It was a very busy job that I had, especially when I worked at the state level. I worked in child protective services, yes, for a little under 2 years in New Jersey. So that in and of itself was exhausting. I mean, I'm proud of the work that I did and the families that I was able to help, especially the kids and the teens. But ultimately, I knew it wasn't my place. So when I was being divinely guided in December of 2022 to become a life coach, I kind of played around with like what I wanted my niche to be, because that was one of the things that I kept hearing everywhere. Oh, you have to niche down, you have to niche down. And I'm like, but I like so many different things and I have so many interests and hobbies. So it was very challenging for me. I'm going to be honest. And also, I don't like being like everyone else. Like, don't put me in a box,
Mhm.
so basically, it was through a lot of trial and error. When I first started the business, I was like all about the spirituality because that's where my life was at the time. I was doing heavy meditation and breath work. I was learning about Reiki energy healing, which I still get sessions even now. I found a fantastic person here in Boston already even though I did leave behind someone who grew to be very much a mentor and a dear friend in New Jersey. And when I decided to start the business, I was also a freelance writer at the time for a brand called deliciously.com. So it was a lot of juggling going on at this point. And I felt like I needed to make a decision as to what was going to, take my energy and my focus. And honestly, life has a way of working things out. In September of 2023, at the end of September, my editor, who, I still keep in touch with her because she actually lives close by in Connecticut, she had to basically be the bearer of bad news, or so she thought, and let me go because of downsizing. A lot of the brands that they had under the company, they just weren't performing well.
Mm-hmm.
And I was shocked at first, and then I was like, well, you know what? This is divine guidance right here. Like, this is my chance. I'm freed up. I have the time. And what I decided to do was change the name of my business. It had a different name at the time, and Mystical Fire Ascension Life Coaching came to me because I see myself very much as a phoenix rising from the ashes, through, this transformation that I've been going through. Um, Big time since 2022. And it wasn't until I would say maybe after the holidays that I really kind of pivoted and wanted to redirect my focus. And I started not focusing so much on just like wanting it to be like all spiritual. But I was like, you know what? Every time I talk to someone about my books and how many books I have, usually one of the first things they say is, oh, wow, that's a lot. Like, how'd you do that?
Right.
Or, I have a book like, that I want to write, but I haven't started it, or I started it, but haven't finished it. And I realized that, I could talk about writing books all day long. It's natural to me because I enjoy it and it comes easily to me. So that was really the determining factor in me, changing course and adding consultations on, as well as the one-on-one coaching sessions that I offer. And I wrote the book, put down the phone, picked up the pen. How I wrote 10 books in 3 years. I wrote that literally in about 2 weeks.
Wow.
And yeah, it's not a very long ebook, but I tell you what, it gets the job done. It answers the question, that the title offers. And I'm very, very happy and proud of it because in such a few short pages, I was able to basically summarize in detail how I literally got to where I am as an author with now 11 books and two more coming out next year, for the school library market. Yeah, I love writing those books. So it's been very, very exciting and very surprising. If you had told me back in 2020, which is when I became an author for the first time, I probably would have just not believed you. If you had told me that 4 years later, I would have 11 books out and more on the way. So
Amazing. Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. And I love that, excuse me, it was your intuition. I could feel that as you were telling your story. It was your intuition that kept coming up, and there had to be something to do with the book writing. And, there's your spirit again, all these little nudges that you receive along the way, because that really is, it's a wonderful legacy for individuals to leave, a book. But here you are with, what is it, 12, 13, and counting, and you're so young, so you'll probably have an
yeah,
entire library of books. But I can't wait for you to share some of those tips, because many of us, especially as we grow older, we're looking to leave something and to be of service, and that's what your books provide. So it really encompasses beautifully your entire purpose for being here. Yes, I absolutely feel that. So very excited, and thank you for sharing that story. There really is. It's like Hansel and Gretel leaving the breadcrumbs along the way. That's how I
I love
feel
that.
our, yeah. It's how I feel our stories are, because it's true. I mean, mine is a mosaic of many different things as well, but So when we have that intuition, though, that's the key. And I love that you are attuned to that. So give us some idea now. I have a really interesting question that many have asked. Do you consider yourself religious or spiritual? And how do you see there's a difference?
Okay, well, when I was growing up, I can honestly say I had no say in the fact that I was raised going to parochial school or Catholic school. I started in kindergarten and stayed in the same elementary school with the same friends and classmates, one room for each grade. Didn't even switch classes at all until high school. And then the high school that I went to, yes, the high school that I went to, Holy Spirit in Absecon, New Jersey, it was just a continuation of the indoctrination that I went
Mm,
through as a kid. And don't get me wrong, the one thing that I can say is that even though I'm not religious anymore, I still celebrate the holidays like a lot of people do. And part of that is because I just love the ritual of celebrating Easter and Christmas. It's just something that I enjoyed doing when I was growing up and even now as an adult. But also my birthday. My birthday is 2 days before Christmas.
mm,
So I grew up loving the whole holiday season. Like I literally celebrate. I'm one of those people where like as soon as Thanksgiving's over, my tree's up. So, I love that about, being able to pick and choose what I still kept from religion and put my own spiritual spin on it. As far as like spirituality goes, I consider myself to be very spiritual because I consider us to be souls having a human experience and not the other way
mm,
around. So I think everyone is spiritual, whether they realize it or not. I feel like religion is something that has been man made. Um,
mhm.
and given to us. But the reality is, you're a soul, you will always be a soul, and that never stops, whether you leave the physical realm or not, you know.
Yes, absolutely. There is. I completely agree with you when you said the indoctrination. It's rules and regulations and sort of the conformity that we humans tend to gravitate towards, and that may have something to do with our reptilian brains, meaning that change is not good because that means it's something where we don't know, and therefore we need to fear it. So when you step that toe outside of the conformed messages or ways of being that you've been taught, then it's like, oh, that's bad news. So I completely understand, and yes, I can see that there really is a big difference between religion and spirituality, in the sense
So
that
much.
yes, in the sense that one is the spirituality, I feel, is much more, well, it is open. It's open to interpretation. It's open to what you feel. In fact, that's the key right there, is what you feel, and allowing things to come into you. So, and that's the complete opposite. Religion, I think, tends to be very rigid, very, and you have to be within that rigid box, or else it's not good. But thank
And
you for that. And go ahead.
no, I was just going to say yes. And, the idea that we have a creator that would take attendance. If you're
Oh,
not attending like certain services and you're going to get rebuked for, I just, I just don't understand how I could have possibly entertained that. But then again, I
yeah.
was a child when a lot of this stuff was being told to me. However, I always knew deep down that this reality that we're in is not what it appears to be, and that
Mm,
religion in and of itself, because I did used to ask questions. Like I was I could call a Bible thumper at one point, and I used to read the Bible for fun, and I took several classes. I had to take religion class K through 12, but then even when I got to college, I still took religious courses, but it was in a different way because I was starting to
hmm
wake up. in a sense. And, I took religion as literature, whereas we were
Mm,
studying it as works of, literature instead of just basically being like by the hand of God or like, given to
right.
us by God or a creator.
Catalyst for your spiritual awakening, and what does it mean to have an awakened soul?
Well, you know what? I feel like my awakening kind of happened in two parts. It initially happened when I was in my early to mid 20s, and I was dating someone. I was in college, and he came over to my house with these DVDs, and he was like, "Okay, I got these from my grandmother." He was like, "Do you want to watch them?" And at the time, we had met working at a Hollywood video. I love dating myself that way, but we were working at a Hollywood video store, and I'm a huge film buff, and I was, and I still am, even though I don't watch films that much anymore. And I was like, well, what are they? And he was like, they're by this guy like named Michael Tessarian, and I had never heard of him before. Um, but he was, very popular amongst people who were into David Icke's literature and
Mm,
his interviews, and basically along the same vein as David Icke. But Michael Tessarian's information was very interesting. I mean, he delved into what is it, sacred geometry,
mm,
astrotheology. He talked about the reptilians and star seeds and where our origin story really comes from and how the Bible was just really kind of a mishmash of like all these texts from around the world, but they were basically, edited and basically made to fit a certain way and a certain standard so that they
right.
could manipulate and control the population. So that's when I first started. And, that awakening led to me joining this EVP forum. It was reverse speaking forum. And what we would do was we would take audio, whether it was us speaking into a microphone and recording it,
Mhm.
like on a program like Audacity, or just using a piece of a song or speaking from, say, a movie or a TV show, and we would upload the snippet into audio and play it backwards. And what we heard was very startling information, to say the least. If I hadn't been at that forum with other people and experienced it for myself, I probably wouldn't even have believed it, at least not back then. There's very much that surprises me now, just to be clear. But back then, when I was still awakening, the things that we were hearing was very interesting, and it was backing up a lot of what Michael Tessarian was saying in his information. So, um, very, very interesting phase in my life being part of that forum. It closed, I want to say in 2010. So I was a member of it
Mm,
for like a little over a year. But I'll never forget the information and the stuff that was shared, because it's a lot of the stuff that I see on Instagram and TikTok now for people that are waking up. And I'm like, wow, I had that experience like almost 2 decades ago. So yeah. And then, if you want to fast forward to 2022, I feel like that's when my awakening kind of got like this jump start or this acceleration, because between 2010 and 2022, it's like, okay, I knew about this stuff, but what was I going to do with the information? It wasn't
right.
discussed as openly as it is
Mhm.
now on podcasts and on social media. So it's almost in a sense like part of me kind of allowed myself to fall back asleep just to be able to
Mm,
function here.
right.
Um, but yeah, in 2022, my long-term relationship ended. I had a cord cutting ceremony done. The night that the cord cutting ceremony was done, it would have been my 6 year anniversary with my ex. And we were
Mhm.
still living together at the time because, I had sold my house that I co owned with my mother. And we had been living together for almost 3 years. So I was still kind of, reeling from the relationship ending and just trying to figure out what my next move was going to be. And I was getting tired of the emotional tug that was happening on my heart, because I knew what I was feeling wasn't all myself. I knew that it was still, my ex as well, close quarters and everything. And the cord cutting ceremony happened. So it helped so much.
Right.
It It helped so much because it released that energy. And the night of the ceremony, I had a dream where this very attractive man walks through the door, and he walked over to me and he hugged me so tightly that I felt it in my sleep. And I woke up from the dream and I was looking around and I'm like, okay. And the
Where did
interesting
you
thing
go?
about that, I'm
Right.
like, where am I and where is
Yeah,
he and
right.
why am I still here type of thing. That's how intense that dream was. And I kind of kept it to myself, but what started happening over the days and weeks and even months afterwards, I started seeing what you would call visions or downloads of me interacting with him. And some of them were very intimate, engagements. And what was happening in the visions, I was feeling it in real time,
Mm,
like it was happening here. So, I'm a firm believer that we exist concurrently here and in multiple parallel universes or timelines, whichever term you want to use. And I knew that what I was experiencing was happening to some degree in real time in a parallel universe.
mm,
So I was a bit perplexed, but then I started doing research because I love to do research. And the term twin flame kept coming up like time and time again. And I was like, okay, well, then as much as I tried to fight it, I was like, this feels like this is what I'm experiencing, even though for me, we haven't met in the physical realm yet.
mm.
um, it lined up with like so much of what other people had experienced themselves. And I found that a lot of people were experiencing it the way that I was instead of meeting their divine counterpart in person and then having the back and forth with the separation and all that stuff. It was playing out for me. I, I kind of like solo, but not really, since we're
Mhm.
all connected, like energetically, like all of
Right.
us. Um, but yeah, it's definitely the twin flame journey is definitely first and foremost a spiritual journey of coming back to self, dealing with old wounds, traumas, pains,
Right.
patterns, limiting
Yes.
beliefs, all of
Mhm.
that stuff. And so, all of that has kind of contributed to my spiritual awakening. And where I
Mm.
was in 2022 compared to where I am today, it's literally like night and day because I'm in a whole new life, a whole new state. I moved from southern New Jersey to Boston literally a month ago. It really did just make a month on the 14th.
Right.
So, I'm very, very happy and very grateful that I listened to spirit because there were so many signs and synchronicities. Um, there was spirit basically asking me very loudly, 2 years ago, how would you feel about living in Boston? It scared me because it was so loud. It's like somebody turned up a microphone and I could hear it clearly. And I'm like looking around and it was just me. I was outside,
Right.
but it was just me. And so,
Yeah.
at that time, I was going through Reiki healing sessions with a woman named Connie, and I absolutely adore her. I still keep in touch with her since I've moved because we've shared a lot together on my healing journey. And she's like, "I'm so excited for you." She's like, "I can't wait until you actually meet him because what would happen is during my sessions with her, she would have visions and I would have visions, but we weren't
Mm.
having the same vision at the same time, which was
Right.
interesting. So at the end of the sessions, she would tell me what she saw, I would tell her what I saw, and we would just, chat it out. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a journey, but the interesting thing that I received from you is your sense of curiosity because
Very much
you
so.
yes, and that is a fabulous gift. I mean, it's when we shut ourselves off to questioning why is that? Right back to when you watch the films. Some people might be offended by them, some people might think it's crazy, just because they're blocking their sense of curiosity. But in your case, it was like That's fascinating. And that's how I am. I mean, that's why I felt that from you, is because when I come across information like that, like I just read some information that they have discovered crystals in our brain.
Oh,
And
yes.
I was just instantly fascinated by that. That's the kind of information that I think is just, it's like, okay, where did they come from and how long have we had, it's just, I just keep going, where, why, how, and your sense of curiosity is what led you on that journey, watching those films, back in the day. And of course, I love what you said, then I went to sleep. That's really interesting dialogue. I'm all about words, and obviously you are too, because you write, but that's a really interesting way to put it, because it's true. I think we always say many of us are walking around unconscious, but really we're like sleepwalking. We're not
Very
paying
much so.
attention.
When I was gonna say, whenever you see movies about zombies, that's basically just Hollywood showing us, hint, hint. This is exactly
Yeah,
what the population is like, most of us, most of the time.
yeah.
But what's been happening since really 2020, it's fascinating how many people on social media I've seen talk about their spiritual awakening coincided with COVID. It either
Mm,
happened right before or it happened during it, which I found very, very interesting because my,
mm,
experience was different. Everyone's experience is going to be unique to them.
right.
But I just found it fascinating that a lot of
Well,
people
that
said that
that
that's what they
makes,
were going through.
yeah, sorry, that makes actually total sense to me, because when COVID hit, it gave many of us an opportunity to reflect on our lives, because we didn't have the static. There was a lot, I call it static. There was a lot less static frequency in the air everywhere around the world. I mean, there were cities that were like, you could hear a pin drop, and even in New York, because people were told to stay inside, and, they didn't have
Oh,
to go to the office. And so when you take all of that static out of the air and you give people an opportunity to breathe and to be with themselves and or their families, it really gives them that opportunity that to get off the hamster wheel that they've been on, because the hamster wheel is where we get caught. We grow up, we get educated, we get our degrees, we graduate, we get our jobs in our cubicles, we're told what to do in a corporation, we work up ourselves up the ladder, or we get another job, we buy the house, and we have the mortgage, so we have to get another job, and it just goes on, and you have a family, and you get caught on that hamster wheel, and you're hit with so much static energy that I always relate it back to a radio. For those of us who still know what radios are, where you're tuning the dial and all you're getting is because you can't connect with anything. And so that's, I think, why COVID, there was a lot of individuals that had those awakenings during COVID, because the static was tampered, and you
I
know
I absolutely agree. And the only thing is that even though a lot of people, they had a lot more time on their hands, unless they were parents, because parents then took on the role of
oh
having to
yeah,
educate their kids at home.
yeah,
So that was a nightmare for a lot of people. And number two, I was a contact tracer during COVID. So it was my job, yes, it was my job to call people and basically get treated like, I was the plague
mm,
because they didn't want to talk.
right,
And it was interesting. We never badgered anyone to speak with us. Like, you could always refuse. Like, it wasn't like the law that you had to speak with us, but so many people were so insulted or offended
mm,
that we were even contacting them. And, I would try to explain to them as calmly as possible that, it is for a good reason. And we really are trying to prevent people from, well, spreading it. Like, we would like to know, like, who you've been in contact with if you're willing to give that information. And I would say that the majority of the people were willing to talk with me. They were, which was nice, because there were a lot of people who, the ones that broke my heart, the cases that I had that broke my heart the most were either the people that were in the hospital. So I couldn't
mm,
speak with them directly. I had to speak to a family member. and that family member would just kind of unload on me because
Oh.
they needed an outlet, somebody
Mhm.
to just basically cry to sometimes, or rant to because it was stressful. Of course, it was stressful.
Mhm.
And, or the people that were going through it solo because they had to isolate. And I went
Right.
through that myself after my mother passed away. 3 months, almost 4 months after she passed away, I developed pneumonia. I developed pneumonia
Mm.
and I had to isolate in my home by myself. And my boyfriend couldn't even come see me, because, I had to stay away from people. And if I was around anyone, like my next door neighbor, who was like my angel, um, she took me to the doctor when I was too sick to go, but she supplied us with masks. And
Mhm.
I was very grateful for that because I wouldn't have been able to drive myself to the doctor. So I was able to kind of tap into what I experienced going through that and channel it into some positivity when I was speaking with people that were isolating themselves at home, and didn't
Right.
have any, roommates, family, friends, or anybody to help them. And a lot of times they were very grateful that I was able to suggest food delivery. There were a lot of nonprofits and organizations that were doing food
Right.
delivery services for people that were isolating. So I feel like even though it came from a place of fear and doom and gloom that was just being pumped into the media left and right, there was still some positivity that came out of it, meaning the people that went through their spiritual awakenings and just the people that were able to, have somebody reach out to them, like a contact tracer like myself, who actually did care whether or not they were able to get to a clinic or receive groceries or medication or even tests.
Yes. Yeah, it was really a test of our human nature. There's no question about it.
Yes,
But
very
I'd
much.
love to delve absolutely. I'd love to delve into your coaching philosophy now, Tamika, because what is your coaching philosophy approach and your driving ideologies behind your practice? Because I would love our audience to get to know a little bit about your coaching practice.
Well, I can honestly say that my philosophy is I always come from a place of service and I want to treat people the way that I would like to be treated if I was coming to someone for services. And also that I'm not perfect. That I'm not perfect. And I say that intentionally because I dealt with imposter syndrome very much. I
Mm.
feel like every time I've leveled up and tried something new in my life, the imposter syndrome tries to rear its ugly head. And when it came to starting my life coaching business, I dealt with that a lot because I didn't know any life coaches in real life one on one. So I could only really go by the connections that I was making through social media or even the video promos that I was seeing on social media. And what I started to find is that a lot of life coaches were kind of putting on this facade. And a lot of them were using gimmicks like, oh,
Mm.
I've taken my income from this and, turned it into that in just like, a few months' time and I can show you how. And it's fine if you're like a financial life coach. But I felt like even people that were supposed to be doing like spirituality in other niches, that was like their gimmick. And so I tried to do the opposite of that and just come across as being genuine and somebody who really cares how my clients are doing and what I can really bring to the table. And if there's something that I don't know, I'm not going to sit there and act like I do. I'm going to be honest about it and say, I don't know the answer right now, but I can always find out and just be honest. And I feel like that people appreciate that. I know that they did when I was a social worker, and it seems to work well, as a life coach too.
Right. So definitely authenticity. And that's something that, we often hear, but it's really something of getting to the core of who you are and sharing that with individuals. And so are there any tips that you would like to share with our audience with reference to your coaching? Is there something that a general coaching tip
Yes.
that you would like to share? Okay, let's have it.
I can honestly say if you feel as though you're at a place in your life where you want to take hold of it, transform your life, don't put it off another moment,
Mm.
because whatever you're putting off could well be the first step to unfolding your beautiful dream life that you've always wanted. And I use myself as an example for that because I gave myself permission to leave behind the life that I had been living in New Jersey. And it was comfortable, but to me, honestly, it was boring. I'm not going to lie. Like, it was just boring. And I felt like I had outgrown New Jersey really years ago. Like, I was that
Mm.
person. I wanted to leave New Jersey when I was even before high school, honestly. But when I graduated high school, I did go to LaSalle University for a semester. However, the area of the school just wasn't for me. It was in northern Philly and it wasn't that far away from Temple University. Both great schools. I just didn't
Mhm.
like the surrounding area. And I
Mhm.
had grown up going to Philly my entire life on field trips and just going there for fun. Same with New York City because I have family that's from there. That's where my mother was originally from. And so giving yourself permission to put yourself first is what I would tell anybody who's
Mm.
thinking of working with a life coach, and be ready to see transformation once you start pouring into yourself the way that we've been so programmed, especially women, to pour into excuse me, our children, our spouses, our loved ones, even our jobs and our hobbies and our friends. We've all been kind of taught to put other people first, but you're really supposed to put yourself first. And I know a lot of women are going to have a difficult time hearing that, especially if they're mothers. But I'm going to put it to you this way: if you're depleted and you're not taking care of yourself and something happens to you, then what? And that's the way that I look at it, because when I was a social worker working in child protective services, I ended up going to the ER twice. Once was
Mm.
for exhaustion because I had been diagnosed at 19 with an underactive thyroid, hypothyroidism, and runs in the family, which I learned later comes from not speaking your truth and having the throat
Mm.
chakra blocked. It does. And
Wow.
women, again, from very early ages, we are kind of taught to just be nice and quiet and sit
Mhm.
still and just not speak the truth and not stand up for ourselves and not tell it like it is. So I feel as though when you're ready to work with a life coach, you should definitely be in that space of wanting to make changes and willing to do the
Right.
work yourself. The life coach isn't going to do it for you, but we're going to be there cheering you on and being like one of your biggest supporters. And even if there's something that you were asked to do, like an activity, and you kind of didn't do it, it's not like we're going to reprimand you or judge you for it. We'll just ask, well, what happened? Why wasn't it done? um, and just allow yourself to and give yourself grace for not being perfect, and realize that this is
Right.
what the spiritual journey and awakening is all about. It's giving yourself grace and realizing that you know we're really meant to be living a heart-centered life, not just all in the mind. And our minds and our hearts should really be coherent and in alignment with each other.
Yes, absolutely. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. So I'm really excited then, Tamika, to ask a question about how you encourage others to come to writing their book or assist them in that
Okay.
way, because I am always looking for individuals who are, you know, writing is my it's actually words are my passion. That's what my passion is. So give us an insight. So you beautifully explained how your coaching approach is. So how do you go about getting individuals to walk into writing their book, becoming an author?
Okay. Well, for me, I always tell them what got me into writing, because they're always curious about that. And so I tell them that writing came naturally to me. It really did. It was something that I started when I was a child. I actually wrote my first short story when I was about 9 years old. and I gave it to my mom as like a little gift. And my grandfather or Papa, he asked me where I copied it from, and I said I didn't copy it from anywhere. I said I wrote it. I was inspired to write it, and from that day on, um, I basically had the support to follow that passion. If reading and writing was something that I loved, and it was something that I was going to consider down the road when I became an adult, then my family was very encouraging with that, and so were my teachers, which was fantastic. And I went into it loving it because not so much just for the recognition. I mean, it was nice having people compliment my work, but I just did it because it was fun, because it was an outlet for me, because I started writing in a journal when I was about 7 years old. That was one of my birthday gifts. And so I have a love for it. So when it comes to working with clients, I will ask them, well, why do you want to write a book? Like, what's your reasons
Mhm.
behind it? Because a lot of people have different reasons. Some people want to do it because it's something that they've always wanted to do. They have a story to share or several. And that can be their reason. Some people want to do it just because they've heard it's a good thing to do to promote their brand or their business, and there's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with that either. So there's multiple reasons, but a lot of people, they will tell me that they want to be a writer. They've always wanted to be a writer. But is it hard? Can you make money from it? And I was like, well, those are good, valid questions to be asking. And those are questions that you definitely want to ask. But I always tell them, don't let money or the,
Mm.
ability to sell copies and make it big, like be your ulterior motive, because that's going to make the journey of writing the book much more difficult for you. You should be
Right.
doing it because you're coming from a place of just loving it and enjoying it and writing it like nobody else is going to read it. Um, because that takes the pressure off imposter syndrome, which a lot of people do have when it comes to writing a book. They think, oh, well, I didn't go to college for it. I've never been trained. Well, a lot of people who became authors didn't have the standard training. They didn't go and get a literature degree. I do have one, but not everyone has one or needs one to become an
Right.
author. It's not required. So just making it feel like we're having a casual conversation, that takes the pressure off of it, and putting people at ease and just telling them, like, look, just because I have 11 books, don't let that or any other published author intimidate you in any kind of way, because we all started somewhere. I had to learn how to read and write and go to school, elementary school, just like everyone else. And, you get the papers back that are basically bleeding. And, it kind of knocks you down a peg, but it helps you to learn and to develop and to get better at it. And even now as an adult, the last two books that I wrote, yes, I got them sent back by my editor, and she was great, but there were things that I had to revise. And even though the revision part is my least favorite part, I did it, because I was supposed to, and I could see like where, there was improvement in the manuscripts. So yeah, just putting the
Yeah.
person at ease, definitely that helps.
I love that. Write it like it's just for you, that you're writing it just for you. So if somebody, I'm really curious what has contributed most to your success so far in your book writing, because you're very prolific, and you've got a few of them here that we're going to mention. But what do you feel has contributed to that?
I guess just the need to want to help people, honestly, because
Mm.
my first book, which is Crying, Learning, and Laughing: Why Students Visit the Teen Center, that came from, to me, that was divinely guided as well. The inspiration for that, it hit me early 2020 when I
Mhm.
was still working as a contact tracer, and I was missing my kids at the teen center. Now, mind you, when I left in May of 2019 to do full-time writing, my kids had graduated, the seniors had gone, so there were still other students that were juniors sophomores and even freshmen that I had left behind that I was thinking about. And I was like, I was like, honestly, that job really, it helped me so much, because if I had never had that job and had that experience, I wouldn't have had the inspiration for the book. And
Mm,
it was like,
right.
I wanted to do something to help promote the programs, because they're school-based youth services programs. And I know how wonderful they are and how helpful and vital they are. So at first I was going to do a, what do you call it, a blog series. And I had
Hmm.
that like outlined, what would be the first and the second and the third. And then my higher self was like, well, why do a blog series when you can just do a book? Like, you've always wanted to write a book. You've written a manuscript already, but haven't published it, which is true. That Crying, Learning, and Laughing was not the first manuscript that I wrote. It was just the first one that I completed and actually went ahead and revised it and put it out for publication. But yeah, this book was really my love letter to school-based youth services programs. And when I put my mind to it and had the outline completed, I finished the book in about 2 to 3 months. And the only reason it took me that long is because I would take breaks in between.
Mm,
I
yeah.
would take breaks. I would allow the chapter to kind of sit and like just come back to it later. Um, and then I moved on to the next one. But I was just very passionate about getting
Right.
it written. And I think that was very important, because sometimes if you allow a project to sit too long and life starts to happen, it can be difficult to revisit it. It can. But because I was very passionate about this book and I really wanted it to come out, that was just the fire that fueled me. And
Right.
I got
Feel the
it published.
passion. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I got it published in by September of 2020. So within 9 months of from start to finish, getting the idea and getting it out to the public.
Wonderful. Yeah. Feel the passion and then go for it. Well, that being
Yeah,
the
and
case, go ahead.
now I was just going to say that book ended up winning and getting recognition in 4 different book award events.
Right.
So it was definitely very surprising, but also it was a lot of fun. The Reader's Favorite Book Awards, they have a ceremony every year. And I was able to go to the ceremony in November of 2022, which was again a very pivotal and transformational year for me. I had a lot going on in 2022, but I did allow myself, in the midst of house hunting and my breakup, to go to the ceremony, and it was a very life changing
Mm,
event, and I'm grateful that I went to it. It was a good networking opportunity. That's how they kind of set it up, because there were workshops and there were great
right.
speakers that came. Um, and then just where it was located, the actual hotel in Miami, it was very nice. And it was during the same week as the Miami Book Fair, which is huge. They have
Mm,
that every year. And the only reason that I ended up not going to the street fair is because I was exhausted. I was literally
mm,
exhausted, like on a soul level at the time. I just felt exhausted because of everything that I was going through
right.
with my breakup, house hunting, and I went back and counted, and I wrote, on top of my full-time job at deliciously.com, I wrote between 4 and 6 manuscripts that year, children's nonfiction manuscripts. So yeah, I was just I was just
Celebrate the
tired.
wins, right? I mean, that's what we
Yeah.
just keep going and going, but we forget to go, wow, I'm pretty amazing. So
Uh-huh.
I love it.
Yeah,
Well,
I am.
is there one or two writing tips that you could share with our audience? Say, if even if they're
Sure.
a seasoned writer or they're starting out, just a little tip that
Uh-huh.
they could take away.
Yeah, and I love getting this question, so thank you. Because usually, and I stand by it, start writing and don't stop. Seriously, like, it sounds
Mm,
so simple, but because of all the reasons that I just already listed, so many people scare themselves out of just starting the process
mm,
because they don't know how it's going to turn out. But that's okay. It's your first book. I mean, and even if it isn't your first book, you can still start it and don't stop. Absolutely. That's the best encouragement
Okay.
that I can put out there. And, you know, if you've gotten to the point where you have started it, don't be afraid to make mistakes because it's
Mm,
not going to be perfect. All the writers that we praise nowadays, the ones that are still here or even the ones that have crossed over into the higher realms, they made mistakes. You know, they goofed. They thought that a lot of their stuff was probably trash and just, but they still kept going. And, you know, they left their legacy behind because we still talk about their work even today. So, you know,
yeah.
don't second guess yourself and don't scare yourself out of what could become one of your greatest achievements.
Mm, I love that. That's perfect. Thank you for that. Well, if there was one message, Tamika, that you could share with the world, what would it be?
Carry yourself and be kinder to each other. Stop being
Mm,
so judgmental. Seriously, stop being so judgmental. And I say that because as someone who is deeply tapped in with spirit and myself, my higher self, I have learned things about myself in past lives that would probably make most people shocked and cringe. Meaning, we come here and we do multiple lifetimes. And a lot of people don't remember what they were like in previous lifetimes. So they come into this one thinking that this is the first when it's probably the furthest from the
mm,
truth. And if you knew things about yourself from past lives, I feel like you would take better care of yourself. You would be kinder to yourself. You'd be kinder to everyone else. Race, ethnicity wouldn't matter. And you would realize that we're just here to really enjoy ourselves and to grow and learn and expand
mm.
as souls and individuals.
Absolutely. Yes. Grow and learn and share. Spot on. Well, thank you for that, Tamika. So, where can people find out more about your services, your books, and your resources? And this will all be available for them as well on the bio pages, but just share with our audience.
Well, I was going to say that, you know, the easiest way, if you don't want to type in my website URL, which is kind of lengthy, it's mysticalfireascensionlifecoaching.com. You can always just Google my name,
Mm,
Tamika M. Murray, and I've gotten the algorithm to really just show love to me because when I type in my name, I'm usually always the only one like going down the list. So it's
mm.
very easy to find me. And if you type in Mystical Fire Ascension Life Coaching, even into Google without trying to like, you know, go to the website, it's going to pop up like the business ad for it or the business information. It'll come up on Google.
Okay, wonderful. Well, because we're here on the Epic Vision Zone, I have one last question for you. If your life were an epic story, what would the title be?
Um, wow. I'm not too much. I'm just human.
Mm, that's really
Yes.
interesting. I love that.
Hmm.
Yes, I always stump people. Not always, but that question I find it fascinating because it gets people to tap into their imagination and maybe
Really
reflect a
like
little
that
bit.
title.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you again, Tamika, for joining us here today. And once again, for information and to connect with Tamika, go to the Epic Vision Zone bio pages where you will find all of her social media and direct contact information. And be sure to follow me on Instagram at Jane Applegath. And don't forget to connect with me at janeapplegath.com, where you can access your free downloads, Creative Power, and Vision Play. Sending you much love and gratitude. This is the Epic Vision Zone, transforming your dreams into epic success.